Though death is an ever-present element in most mainstream games, you'd be hard-pressed to find many that are actually about death. After all, it's pretty heavy as far as subject matter goes, and most mainstream titles don't have the pace to explore it properly. As such, it often falls to the indie scene and its smaller, more personal experiences to deal with death, and Spiritfarer is the latest title to do just that, with charming visuals and delightful life sim gameplay that provide a unique contrast to the game's otherwise somber themes. The game puts players in control of Stella, the newly appointed Spiritfarer whose job is to sail the seas, gather spirits, and grant their final wishes before guiding them to the Everdoor, which serves as a gateway to the afterlife. It's through these passengers, their backstories, and their eventual passing that Spiritfarer reflects on death and loss, and while there are some that really stand out, the broad variety of characters that you meet allows the game to tackle a lot of different aspects of its chosen subject matter. From a heart-wrenching display of life's frailty to the devastating unfairness of not being able to say goodbye, Spiritfarer isn't afraid to get incredibly sad, but it manages to balance this out with some surprisingly optimistic themes as well, most notably that of love. So many of the game's stories involve love as a force for healing or growth, but it's most notable as the driving force behind Spiritfarer's gameplay. What I mean by this is that as a life sim, the bulk of Spiritfarer's gameplay is concerned with caring for your passengers. Once you pick up these wayward spirits, you have to give them a comfortable place to stay, keep them fed, and help them work through whatever final tasks they have before they decide it's time to move on. This means you'll be harvesting materials to build homes, gathering ingredients to cook dishes, and sailing the world to complete specific requests, and for my money, I think Spiritfarer does a solid job of making this checklist-style gameplay pretty engaging. It's not immune to the tedium that comes with the genre's reliance on repetitive tasks, but at the very least, a lot of the jobs you need to do to craft or harvest material feature some sort of active element to them, like a minigame that allows you to gain bonus rewards for a job well done, so at the very least you're never just playing them on autopilot. Once you have your materials, Spiritfarer lets you use them to build and upgrade structures on your massive ship, which can serve a couple of different purposes. The most obvious purpose is that they fulfill your passengers' requests. Most characters will ask you to build them a home on your ship before asking you to upgrade said home, but they'll also request that you build other amenities such as lumber mills and looms. Beyond simply satisfying your passengers' needs, a lot of these structures provide you with a constant source of materials, such as vegetables or cotton through the variety of gardens at your disposal, while others let you process those materials into completely new ingredients, like the loom which lets you process thread into fabric. This is all pretty standard, but the cool thing about Spiritfarer's life sim elements is that as you look after your new spirit friends, they begin to help you out around the ship. By feeding them their favorite foods and hugging them when they're feeling down, you're able to raise their emotional state, and when they're feeling good, they'll interact with the structures you've been building. Summer the Snake, for instance, will sit in your gardens and play music to help your vegetables grow faster, while Artul the Frog often cuts logs into usable timber when he's feeling happy. It's a pleasant little feedback loop that helps you cut down on all the busy work by making sure your friends are doing well, but it also means that when these passengers finally do move on, their absence is almost impossible to ignore. And helping these new friends move on is intrinsically linked to progressing further in the game. This is because the game's crucial upgrades, ones that allow you to explore beyond certain barriers in the world, require a certain special ingredient to craft, one that can only be obtained by delivering a passenger to the Everdoor. You can upgrade your ship's size and catalog of blueprints a decent amount without this ingredient, but eventually, you're going to need something that you haven't seen yet, something that only exists beyond one of the world's various barriers. So eventually, you're going to need to move forward, and you can't move forward without letting go. Not every upgrade is so emotionally charged though, thank God, as the game also features some light platforming which has its own skills to unlock. These include double jumps, a zipline ability, and a glide, and more often than not, these abilities are used in the Metroidvania sense, to block off sections of early areas until players come back later on. The platforming itself is functional but not particularly exciting, at least not while you're exploring the various islands found in the world. They're at their best when you sail into a storm or some other environmental hazard that triggers a special resource collection minigame in which you have to race around your personally planned ship collecting items. With these disparate mechanics bundled together, Spiritfarer's gameplay provides a fairly relaxed experience. Like most life sims, it can get a little tedious at times, especially in the later stages where you have less passengers to lighten the repetition load, but the active element found in most tasks keeps you from simply playing on autopilot. Furthermore, the inclusion of light platforming breaks up the management monotony fairly well, even if it's not overly exciting or challenging for the most part. Spiritfarer is perfectly enjoyable on a mechanical level, and those mechanics mesh well with the tone and themes of the game. But, while its interesting mix of genres and distinctive premise were initially what had me curious about the game, Spiritfarer's strongest elements have to be its charming hand-drawn visuals and moving soundtrack. For a game that deals with such grim themes, Spiritfarer features a surprisingly pleasant hand-drawn art style which often utilizes a soft color palette to great effect. The bulk of the game uses these visuals to reinforce the low-intensity vibe established by the gameplay, but like Spiritfarer's story and mechanics, this is contrasted with the occasional spike in intensity. These spikes include the quicker platforming sections amidst dark and stormy weather or brilliant cosmic events, but they're also found during the game's emotionally powerful farewell sequences. The location of the Everdor itself is particularly memorable thanks to its vibrant, contrasting reds and whites, and the moments that take place there are that much more impactful because of how strongly it stands out. On their own, Spiritfarer's visuals are absolutely gorgeous, but the experience is bound to stick with me thanks in large part to its effective use of music. Much of the game is accompanied by a light ambiance of strings, woodwind, and piano, which contributes to its mostly peaceful tone, but like the rest of the game, these laid-back elements give way to much more energetic, fast-paced pieces during the appropriate sequences. And just like the visuals, it's at the Everdor where Spiritfarer's music shines brightest, as the music swells and grows more intense as you say your final goodbyes. No matter what else I have to say about this game, Spiritfarer's farewells are going to be with me for a long while after this. I do also think it's worth mentioning a lot of the smaller elements that Spiritfarer contains as well, beyond the emotionally charged soundtrack and pleasant art style. For instance, the game features a surprising level of animation which covers each unique task, each passenger's eating, and most importantly, unique hug animations for every character. I also adore the humanized animal designs of your various passengers, and though the game doesn't feature full voice acting, you still get a good feel for their personalities with what little it does have. The only complaints I have with the game on a presentation level are that, for a 2D game, I ran into way more frame rate issues than I ever would have expected. Additionally, there were times where the art just straight up glitched out horribly, and the game even crashed on me a handful of times, which was disappointing. Infrequent technical issues aside, I'm really impressed with what Spiritfarer brings to the table. I can't say I found its side content overly interesting, and the game doesn't appear to have much in terms of end-game content, but the core experience has roughly 20 hours of playtime to offer, which is pretty substantial. And if you have a friend you'd like to bring along for the journey, then the game also offers local co-op, which can honestly help to cut down on the tedium of Spiritfarer's life sim mechanics. At the end of the day though, I'm content with the time I spent with this game. It doesn't overstay its welcome, but it feels like a considerable experience nonetheless. With all that said, Spiritfarer is good. Though its platforming and life sim mechanics don't bring anything particularly new to the table, Spiritfarer's unique mix of gameplay elements fits surprisingly well with its earnest exploration of death and loss. It would also be really easy for a game like this to be relentlessly depressing, but Spiritfarer is constantly offering up little glimmers of joy amidst its heavy themes, and its gorgeous visuals and soothing music play a huge role in keeping things feeling relatively light between its really affecting moments. It's not without some issues though, as the tedium that comes with most life sim games rears its head here relatively often, and although they were rare occurrences, the severity of Spiritfarer's technical issues did taint my experience somewhat. However, if you're looking for a game that blends distinct gameplay elements with a really heartfelt story, then I can wholeheartedly recommend Spiritfarer. Spiritfarer is available on PC, Xbox One, PS4, and Nintendo Switch.